Everything you think you know about World War II dogfights is wrong. For decades, we've been told the same story. The Japanese Zero was the deadliest fighter in the Pacific. Lighter, faster, more maneuverable. American pilots didn't stand a chance in a turning fight. But imagine this, a hulking American fighter, nicknamed the Ensign Eliminator because it killed so many rookie pilots, suddenly appearing behind a Zero at 400 miles per hour, matching every twist, every dive, every desperate escape maneuver. Impossible. That's what Japanese pilots thought, until the F4U Corsair started doing exactly that, and they never saw it coming. To understand why this matters, you need to go back to December 1941. Pearl Harbor had just been attacked, and American pilots were dying in horrifying numbers. The Mitsubishi A6M-0 was a revelation. Japanese engineers had created something the West thought impossible, a lightweight fighter with incredible range, blistering speed, and the ability to turn on a dime. In the first months of the war, Zeros achieved a kill ratio of 12-1. Imagine being a young American pilot in a clunky F4F Wildcat, watching a Zero dance around you like you were standing still. Pilots called them ghosts. They're 1 second, gone the next, and you were trailing smoke before you even knew what happened. The US military was desperate. They needed a fighter that could match the Zero's agility, but also survive punishment. They needed speed, they needed firepower, they needed a miracle. What they got was the Vought F4U Corsair, and at first, nobody wanted it. The Corsair was a beast. Its massive Pratt & Whitney engine required a propeller so large that engineers had to invent the distinctive bent wing design just to give it ground clearance. It was heavy. It was difficult to land on carriers. The cockpit sat so far back that pilots couldn't see the deck. The Navy rejected it for carrier operations. Young pilots crashed so often during training that they nicknamed it the Ensign Eliminator. But there was a secret hidden in that bent wing design, a secret that would change everything. Here's what the history books forgot to mention. The Zero's legendary maneuverability had a fatal flaw. At low speeds, it could outturn anything in the sky. But at high speeds, above 300 miles per hour, its controls became stiff, heavy, almost immovable. Japanese pilots were trained for low-speed dogfighting because that's where their aircraft excelled. The Corsair was the opposite. That massive engine didn't just make it fast, it made it devastatingly effective at high-speed combat. At 400 miles per hour, while a Zero pilot was wrestling with frozen controls, a Corsair pilot could roll, dive, and maneuver with surgical precision. It was like the difference between a sports car on ice and a tank on rails. And there's the dark part nobody talks about. The Japanese military knew about this weakness. They knew, but they never fixed it. The Zero's design prioritized range and maneuverability over everything else, including pilot survival. There was no armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks, a single bullet in the right place, and the entire aircraft became a fireball. Japanese military doctrine viewed pilot survival as secondary to aircraft performance. Meanwhile, American designers were wrapping their pilots in armor plating. When Corsair pilots figured this out, when they learned to fight at speed instead of trying to match the Zero's low-speed turning, the Pacific Air War transformed overnight. The Marines were the first to embrace the Corsair. In February 1943, VMF 124 took their bent-wing fighters into combat over Guadalcanal. Within months, they had developed what they called boom and zoom tactics. Dive from altitude, attack at maximum speed, and climb away before the Zero could respond. Japanese pilots didn't understand what was happening. They would see a Corsair diving toward them, try to turn into the attack, the maneuver that had saved them 100 times before, and discover that at 400 miles per hour, they couldn't move fast enough. The Corsair would roll with them, tracking perfectly, 6 50 caliber machine guns blazing. The hunters had become the hunted. By 1944, Corsair pilots had achieved a kill ratio of 11-to-1 against Japanese aircraft. The same ratio the Zero had enjoyed just 2 years earlier, now completely reversed. The Japanese called the Corsair Whistling Death because of the distinctive sound its wing-mounted oil coolers made during high-speed dives. Imagine being a Zero pilot, hearing that whistle, knowing what was coming, and being unable to do anything about it.
So why does this matter? Why should you care about a 70-year-old aircraft? Because the Corsair story reveals something uncomfortable about how we remember history. We love simple narratives, the nimble underdog versus the lumbering giant, the elegant samurai sword versus the brute force American hammer. But reality is messier. The Zero wasn't a perfect fighter. It had crippling weaknesses that Japanese engineers chose to ignore. The Corsair wasn't a failure, it was misunderstood, designed for a type of combat that pilots hadn't yet invented. The lesson here isn't about airplanes, it's about assumptions. Japanese pilots assumed Americans would fight their way. American designers assumed carrier landings mattered more than speed. Everyone assumed the Zero was unbeatable. They were all wrong. And in war, being wrong has consequences measured in lives. The Corsair remained in production until 1953, the longest production run of any piston engine fighter in American history. It flew in Korea, in the French Indochina conflict, even in the Honduran Soccer War of 1969. But its greatest legacy? Proving that sometimes the ugliest solution is the right one. That the machine everyone thought was broken was actually revolutionary. That is the forgotten story of the F4U Corsair. And now you know the truth. Subscribe now, because the next forgotten truth might be the one that changes everything you believe. The Last Stand, a mysterious historian uncovering dark and forgotten stories.